Well, hello everyone. Our topic for this week is actually a follow-up from the article I wrote in the June newsletter about finding happiness. And the question today is, what is the secret to finding happiness? Well, is it something that you acquire from outside? Is it something you create yourself? Can the right person make you happy? Do you know people who say they're happy? Do they seem happy all the time? Do you believe them when they say they're happy all the time? You know, in 1776, 244 years ago, our founders declared independence from Great Britain. And they stated that the pursuit of happiness is a basic human right. Unfortunately, they failed to include instructions on how one should pursue happiness to be successful. So I did the next best thing. I went to the internet and I searched for information on happiness. I found stories that were funny and humorous with some truth to them. I found some scholarly articles, and some of them had research that backed them up. But the article that really caught my attention was called How to Pray for Happiness by Evan Moffick. It was a short little 2-page article, and I discovered that Evan Moffick is the rabbi for a congregation on the North Shore of Chicago. He writes regularly about Jewish wisdom that can be shared and be meaningful to people of all faiths. I discovered in doing some research that this article actually is a summary of a book, which I have now purchased. And he has written a number of other books about Jewish wisdom that can be shared with others. And if you are at all interested, you might look it up. Well, in the article, How to Pray for Happiness, he shares a series of blessings that are found in many prayer books and suggests that we use them in praying for happiness. I wasn't sure of this until I read the actual prayer itself, and I believe he's onto something that we can all use. No matter our religion or belief, these are good, practical things that help us on the journey to happiness. Well, most of us know that happiness is seldom found in short-term pleasure, but mostly in things that last longer and help our lives to flourish. And I like that word, to flourish. So consider these 10 action possibilities from the rabbi's prayer. If we follow through on them, we perhaps can plant the seeds for happiness to flourish in our lives. Number 1, honor those who gave me life. This is taken right out of the 10 Commandments, one of which is honor our fathers and mothers. Now, this may be challenging to some of us if we have conflicted relationships with parents, whether they are alive or deceased. But the rabbi makes a distinction between honoring parents, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we always like or love them, but honor them is a way that we show respect. Our family, we also want to honor family, those who've been close to us, who helped raise us. Maybe we have other family members who were part of raising and being part of who we are today. I have found that it is, as we research my ancestry, that just learning about them and thinking about them, and sometimes that's a way of honoring those who have come before us. I think that we honor people who are teachers and others who have influenced in our lives, maybe in ways large or small. And I'm continually amazed when I remember something that someone said or did years ago for me that have had an impact that I remember today. And many of us have spiritual leaders who are also, who have given life to us in some way, made something important to us. So how do we honor? Well, one way is research and read about and have a family history and pass that on to those in our family as well. For people who are alive, we can write a note or a letter just to say, thank you for this. I'm thinking about you, remembering a holiday or a birthday. I think many of us do that in ways with friends and people in our lives. If we still send out Christmas letters or we send out notes on birthdays. I will never forget how both of my grandmothers always sent a note, and my Nana would put maybe a $5 or a $10 bill in it for my birthday, even when I was an adult. And I always knew she was thinking about me. That was a way that she honored me. We also can make donations in honor or in memory of someone, and sometimes that's a powerful way to give honor to people who are part of who we are. And even if all we do, even if we write just personal recognition or a journal, I think when I speak to you and share a story from my life, there are some ways in which I am giving honor to those people as well. So honor those who gave me life. Number 2, practice kindness. Kindness begins, I think, as an attitude that we have inside. It is then reflected in our speech, the words that we say, and also in our actions. Now, the first person that we should practice kindness to is ourselves. Sometimes we are critical, sometimes we are hard, sometimes we just don't stop and remember that it's okay to do something nice for ourselves. So practice kindness toward ourselves. Always practice kindness to our family, those who are around us, to neighbors, to people who serve us, whether they're here on our campus or whether it's someone at the grocery store or the bank. A thank you, a word, a kind word can go a long way to spread kindness around. And one of the more difficult things is to practice kindness to people who disturb us, who bother us, who make us angry. Sometimes that takes work. Practicing kindness doesn't necessarily mean you make someone your best friend, but it's that you choose to respond as kindly as possible, even if they are not reciprocating. So number 2, in praying for happiness, practice kindness. Number 3 is to learn constantly. To be open to new information, that's always a good thing. To be open to new ideas, and that is sometimes a little more challenging. Many of us watch the same news programs or read the same magazines or read the same articles, and it's nice to receive information that we find we want to know and are comfortable with and agree with. But it also means that our vision can be quite limited. One of the challenges of social media and other things on the internet is that they try to predict your responses, and so you end up with the same kinds of information from the same people. Let me give you an example. If I search on the internet for a cover like I did recently for the back of my truck, for weeks now, every time I go, any ad anywhere includes ads for truck covers, even though I'm past needing to worry about that. If you go on Facebook or some other social media, the people that you interact with frequently become the ones that you read about. And if you don't interact with someone for a while, they sort of drop off that list. So what happens is if you read an article or a comment that tells you about how wonderful Village on the Green is, then you are liable the next time you go on for it to bring more of those kinds of things. If you read one that's negative, it'll start bringing more negative comments to you. And so you don't really get the whole perspective. So be open to new ideas. Read, maybe a little more than we think. Listen is always a good thing. We can learn by going to museums or galleries or lectures or a public speaker. Of course, right now, the virus makes that difficult. But if you are internet savvy or have someone who can help you, you can find things about any of these museums or galleries or find lectures and things on the internet. I discovered the Smithsonian Institute in Washington that I can go to their website and get written information about what's in their exhibits and even visual tours. I started watching one on an archaeology thing, and if you're interested, it was detailed, but it went on and on. This woman was giving you what was probably almost like a college course on, but it was fabulous. There's other media on that you can find. TED Talks, TED. People talk about inspiration and information, all kinds of things. Some people listen to podcasts. There are online classes from almost every university, including just online ones. And something I discovered recently was my wife and I have discussed taking a Viking cruise in Europe one day. So she signed me up to get their information. So now I get emails from them regularly. But now that they're not cruising because of the virus, they are using people who are resources in the places where the Viking cruises normally go, and they're streaming that. They're streaming someone who talks every week about food in different places, people in museums, people who normally would give a lecture maybe on the boat or would talk, or maybe tour you if you went to Budapest, Hungary. They have all of this on there. And it's just a marvelous thing. So you can find a lot of things. Learn constantly. Number 4, invite other people into my home, and that helps build happiness. Now, at first glance, that also seems kind of impossible right now with our distancing. But while physically inviting may be a challenge, the attitude of welcoming people into our lives can still be communicated. Welcome a new neighbor. Write them a note, make a phone call, just to welcome them to our community. Be a good neighbor. You can always share something practical. If you're cooking a meal and you've got a little extra, you can share a dish. You might share a household item that someone might like. You might, if there's a buy one, get one free at the store, you go ahead and buy 2 and you share one with someone else. It's nice to be a good neighbor by sharing a simple gift that's unexpected or something extra. And if you talk to people who you know or are neighbors, listen for opportunities that they may express that lets you know, oh, they like this kind of tea and they haven't had it in a while, but I know I can get that for them, or whatever it is. Invite other people into your home, figuratively or literally. Well, number 5 is to be there when other people need me. Sometimes people need a ride. Sometimes they need help buying something extra at a store. Perhaps people need help when something happens in their lives and you just make a phone call. Their spouse is ill, something is going on, and you just call. It's good to let somebody know that I'm thinking of you when circumstances arise. A card or a note or something simple can make a big difference. Did you know that there are people who need help corresponding with family or friends? They physically have trouble writing, or it's not very clear, or they could use some help, and you could be their scribe. They could tell you what to write, you can do that. That could be really simple. When someone needs you, you might even just be the doorman during a party or a wake. While they're talking to their guests, you're the one who's opening the door or serving the drinks or attending a wake or a visitation or just being there when there is a crisis in someone's life. I will never forget the people who stood around on the edges of the graveside service we had for my father when he died 9 years ago. We didn't get a chance to talk very much. Frankly, I wasn't in a good enough condition to talk very much. I was crying a lot that day. But I remember the faces of each person who was there and will be eternally grateful. Being there is just a good thing. And be there for children. If you're around where there's children or others, speak to them as if they are adults, like they're important too, and you will communicate an awful lot to them. Well, that's the first 5. How to pray for happiness. We pray for these things, but they're really actions in our lives. So we have 5 more. Number 6, celebrate life's sacred moments. This comes actually from the word of the prayer that's about a wedding and about being there before a bride, but our author has extended it beyond just weddings. Weddings, anniversaries, baby namings, graduations. You know, I have had relationships as a leader in our church with a number of young people who have recently graduated from college. So I get invitations, and I found that just a card or a word or a phone call can mean an awful lot. Find ways to participate in these events. Did you know that you can stay here and have someone at a wedding across the world hold up their phone with the camera on it, and you can watch it here? It is amazing the things we can do where we're participating in some way. Celebrate the life events. Brings happiness to all of them, because these events are full of emotion, positive and rich relationships and deep meetings. So being part of that celebration can bring happiness to you and others. Number 7, I touched on this earlier, but it's supporting other people during a time of loss. Losing a loved one is often one of the most difficult things that happens to us in our lives. So the simple thing is to offer words of condolence. That's all you have to say, with a card or your voice. You can visit or sit Shiva or be with people during these times if that is what they need. And sometimes just having somebody there with them makes a difference, even if no words are spoken. You can attend a service. You can send notes or phone calls at intervals, maybe a week later or a month later, or you know an anniversary's coming up, or you're just thinking about them. Those kinds of touching base with someone after a loss can mean an awful lot. The point is to say very little, because there's not much we can say that really can make people feel better, but listen a lot. Being present with someone, even when it's uncomfortable for us, because it's certainly uncomfortable for them. You might ask how you can help, but you might also bring a few ideas of what you might be able to offer. And don't try to cheer people up when they feel bad, or try to explain how they're going to survive or what's going to happen. Just take seriously their grief and their pain, however they need to express it, and trust that your presence with them is the most important thing. Supporting people during a loss. Number 8 is a religious one, as you might say, because we're talking about praying for happiness. And this is praying with intention, engaging and using prayer as part of your life for other people. Now, the rabbi who wrote this talks about going in the synagogue and also in your personal life, the prayers that are often repeated and chanted. I'll never forget a woman who, even when she was unconscious and dying, responded when we recited the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. She had used that so often in her life, it was part of her, even when everything else seemed to be falling apart. So words, music, the prayers that we express can be very much soothing and an important part of who we are. Prayer can be praising God for this wonderful day we have, gratitude for the friend who just gave us a call, or maybe interceding by praying for someone you know who is ill or going through a difficult time, praying for our leaders and our nation, praying for the construction workers next door that they're safe and do a good job in what they're doing. We can name specific people, write down specific concerns, make a little list, but praying with intention is giving a good thought to others. If you're not particularly religious, even just saying, God be with them today, or I'm sending good thoughts to my friend. Those are also ways that we can do that aren't as specifically religious as perhaps I would do. Number 9. This is a tough one, folks. We build happiness in our lives when we learn to forgive those who hurt us, and we seek forgiveness when we have hurt others. Forgiveness is usually something that takes time and effort. It does not usually happen immediately. I recently watched a documentary on the survivors and the people of the Emanuel 9 who were shot in a church in Charleston, South Carolina 5 years ago. And one of the remarkable things is there were maybe three survivors, but the survivor who talked on film found herself shortly afterward speaking aloud words of forgiveness to the man who had shot her and who had killed 9 of her friends right in front of her. She surprised herself when those words came out of her mouth, and she admitted that her feelings were really more still pain and anger, and not feeling forgiveness, but somehow in her faith, she had to at least try to do that. And so those words just came out of her mouth. I suspect she'll be learning to live up to those words every day of her life for quite a while. Forgiving doesn't mean necessarily forgetting. It's okay to protect ourselves if it's someone who has hurt us once and we think will hurt us again. But we also need to learn to forgive, because forgiveness is about us not carrying pain and anger any more than we have to. It's to try to release that and not carry that around with us. And of course, to ask someone's forgiveness or apologize when we know that we have said or done something that hurt them. So we find happiness when we can learn forgiveness in our lives so we don't carry around those unhappy things. Number 10. I bet you thought I'd never get to the number 10. How to pray for happiness is to commit to constant growth. We can learn and grow no matter our age or place in life's journey. There's always something to take in and learn, even if it's a challenge. So we should be open to personal growth. I occasionally joke about, but I'm very serious about some of my own personality tendencies that I have to work on, and that most of those are lifelong growth. It's not something you just say, oh, I checked that off the box. I'm never going to say an unkind word again. Oh, no, guess what? Sometimes there are things we practice during our whole lives. I love this quote from Vince Lombardi, the famous coach of the Green Bay Packers, who won the first 2 Super Bowls and several other important games back in their day. Vince Lombardi, who was a fierce coach, but who was also a very wise man, once said, "Perfection is not attainable. But if we chase perfection, perhaps we can catch excellence." So looking to grow can bring unexpected things in our lives. I encourage spiritual growth and direction in our lives. And in the next few months, a few of us are going to be talking about how to offer some more opportunities for that here on our campus. So the 10th action step we can take in our prayer for happiness is to commit to constant growth. Did you notice that most of these 10 practices don't happen when we're just sitting alone in our own home? They involve other people, inviting people into our lives, practicing kindness, bringing comfort and support to others. So often, the way we experience happiness involves our interaction with others. Viktor Frankl said, "The door to happiness opens outward." The door to happiness opens outward. Well, I agree that a religious worldview, our religious practices can be important roots for our happiness. And it's not just about good deeds that have virtue on their own, but we're part of spiritual practices that echo through time and eternity. The prayers at a service, the music that we sing, these things often have been sung and prayed and used by people for generations. Scientific studies show that people who pray or have faith practices report they're happier, they have less pain when they're ill, they recuperate better from illnesses. It's sort of the whole idea of karma. You know, what we give, we receive. How we share things, comes back to us. We can be part of the good things in life by contributing a little bit. You know, sometimes we do things like that in religious sense that is a bit of a sacrifice. The rabbi admits that once a year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, he is working all day. He's delivering sermons and leading prayer for 8 straight hours, and part of that day is a requirement to fast. And he says fasting is the last thing he wants to do because it makes that day even more difficult for him as a leader. And yet, it's a commandment and a tradition for thousands of years. And so he admits that when he fasts, he's part of the experience and the connection of those who are there doing the same. It's not pleasurable in the moment. Your stomach growls. You get hungry. But looking back, he is aware that that was part of the power of that day for him. So sometimes those kind of practices can mean a lot. Well, happiness is more about the journey than it is about the destination. I hope you found these 10 actions to be a map that might help us on our journey. I'm going to post a copy of these notes on the Resident app under Spiritual Life. You can always call or email me or the front desk if you want a paper copy. And if you are interested, you might discover that Evan Moffic, Moffic, has other books and articles that he's written that might be of interest to you. So, may the journey of this prayer lead you and I to a life that's filled with meaning and happiness now and always. Have a great day.